Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leroy Butler, and I'm here today to talk about change management in the context of higher ed technology. In particular, how can you effectively go through the process of change management within your organization when trying to implement or introduce new ideas or new technologies to the organization. Just a little bit about myself. I am the Associate Vice President for Technology at Lewis University, as you can see on my slide template. Lewis University is a liberal arts institution outside of the Chicagoland area. I will tell you a little bit more about it here in a minute. I've been at Lewis for approximately a year now. In fact, a year and 2 weeks, according to my the date here. When I came to Lewis, I really didn't know anything about the institution, and through using some of the tools that I will talk about this morning, I was able to fairly quickly get up to speed on and understand what the needs are and the perceptions of technology on the campus, and then move forward in trying to help facilitate change within the university when it comes to technology. Prior to going to Lewis, I served at another institution in Ohio, where I was there for approximately 6 years, and before that I spent the vast majority of my life in the great state of South Carolina. So if you hear a y'all come out in the course of my presentation, please forgive me. I'm a native Southerner, born, bred, raised, and educated in the great state of South Carolina, but I have moved to the upper Midwest and have spent the last 8 years of my life there. As you can see on the screen, I am a project management professional. I believe strongly in the project management methodology, and I believe that it's a great fit for individuals that work in the IT field, not only in higher education, but in IT in general. How many of you are project management professionals here or have training in project management? Okay. One of the great things I like about project management is that it gives you a framework, or it gives you a methodology which to go about instituting change within your organization. Now, if you are familiar with the project management life cycle, there are basically 5 phases in the project management life cycle according to PMI, which is the largest project management organization in the world. First, you have the initiating phase, where you go through the process of understanding what is there a need for a project, or how would you go about bringing a project into an organization. Then there's the planning phase, where you talk about what are some of the things that you would have to consider as you move forward, and planning out the process of going through a project in your organization. And then, of course, once you have the planning done, you have to execute the plan in order to bring about the change that is associated with the project. And as you're going through the execution phase, you always want to monitor and control what you're doing throughout the project, which is very important, and sometimes an often overlooked aspect of the project management methodology when folks use it in bringing in technology and other resources into an organization. And finally, when you have executed your plan, the closing phase, which you will go through the process of taking a look at what the project has accomplished, looking at the lessons that were learned, and then trying to use that for continuous improvement as you're moving forward. I like to look at this as a process of change. Throughout the entire project management life cycle, change is a very important part of the project management life cycle. In fact, change management, there are classes and certifications that you can get just in change management alone. Change is very important in how you manage that change in your organization in order to make sure that the change is readily accepted by the organization and is successful in achieving the outcomes that you hope to achieve. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about Lewis. Of course, we're located in the Midwest. We're about 30 miles southwest of Chicago. We're a comprehensive Catholic institution. How many of you work in private or religious-based organizations? A little bit different from when you will work in the public sector. For one of the great things about it is that you have a lot of flexibility in how you go about accomplishing your job from a technology perspective anyway. But one of the bad things about it is that usually a lot of the processes within religious-based organizations and private organizations, and I had the privilege of working at both, A lot of the processes are pretty organic in nature, which means that we started the process a while ago, sort of worked, we tweaked it, based on the things that we learned as we went through the project or went through the process. And there's really, in some cases, a lack of, I guess you could say, solid research or foundation for a lot of the processes. And that is one of the things that I found at Lewis. We focus on the liberal arts and professional studies. Our two biggest programs are nursing and aviation. We have a full-blown airport that's adjacent to the campus. When I drive into work every morning, you can see the planes circling the campus where the pilots are actually practicing their takeoffs and landings. And it's an interesting environment to work in. In fact, a lot of our graduates go on to work at the two major airports in the Chicagoland area, Midway and O'Hare. We have approximately 6,600 students. Based on the numbers that were shared with us before I left, we are getting close to the 7,000 range. It's been a good recruiting year for us. And we have 7 campuses. Now, these campuses aren't what you would call like a university system, say like the University of California system where you have large campuses throughout. What these campuses are, we have the main campus, which is located in Romeoville, Illinois. And then we have 5 satellite campuses in the Chicagoland area that are pretty much not independent, but they're totally dependent upon the main campus for all of the support resources. And then we have a campus in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we do a lot of work with Kirtland Air Force Base, which is located right outside of Albuquerque. So when I first got to Lewis, I had a meeting with the leadership, the president, provost, and the senior vice presidents, and I asked the question, what is the goal for Lewis University when it comes to technology? And this is the answer that I was given. And so, of course, as you can see, innovative transformational technology is a very, very vague term, so I asked for some specifics. And well, first of all, I didn't really get a straight answer to that, but one of the most interesting answers I got to it was this. And this actually came from one of the senior level officials at the university. She basically told me, she said, well, Leroy, I don't know what it is, but I know what we have is not it. And so my job was to go out and help try to figure out what it is that they were looking for with very little input as far as the leadership. They just know that things weren't working and they needed someone to come in and lead the effort to help change things on campus from a technology perspective. So a couple of prerequisites in my process that I went through, I wanted to understand the mission, culture, and needs of the institution. Now, the mission was fairly easy, and this was actually one of the great things that I found. In our strategic plan for Lewis University, there is an entire strategic direction focused on technology. Now, for me, that was a little unusual because in previous institutions or organizations that I've been a part of, technology was pretty much interwoven throughout all the various strategies for the organization. At Lewis, they had a keen focus on making sure that technology was an emphasis as they moved forward in the institution and helping the students achieve their academic and professional goals and giving faculty and staff the resources they needed in order to do their job. So that was a very refreshing thing to see. They had a pretty keen focus on what they wanted to do with technology from a high-level perspective. Not a lot of details there. Now, here's one of the interesting things that I found. Before I actually started working at Lewis, they had several consulting firms come through the university and do an evaluation of the technology. I didn't see the reports ahead of time until after, of course, I said I was going to take the job, and then they shared everything with me. That's usually when they pull the covers back and they show you all of what's going on. And here are some of the things that the consultants across the board had said about the university and the technologies that were there. And I won't go through all of these individually, but to summarize, the consultants basically said the university had a wealth of technology resources available, but they weren't being used very well. And there wasn't a lot of direction for using these technologies. There's good and bad. Of course, if you have a wealth of technology, then you can see that, okay, well, at least one of the hurdles has been crossed that you need to cross. But when you don't have a lot of structure and organization within the technology support organization or clear direction on how it's going to be used, it could, in some cases, be worse than not having technology at all. Giving folks a lot of resources and not giving them the tools to use them effectively and efficiently in their daily lives is not really a good process to go through when you're looking at implementing technology into an organization. So some stats on the technology staff. We have a really good staff. We have 28 full-time employees. We have 6 graduate assistants. And at any given time, we have 30-plus student workers that work within the department. We're fortunate at Lewis to have a very strong computer science department and management information systems department within our College of Business. And of course, all of those graduates are looking for opportunities to get some real-world experience. And what better labor force that you can get than eager college students who want to get some experience and work for a little more than minimum wage. We pay them a little more than minimum wage. And we also have regional contacts at each of the campuses, regional campuses. Now, this was another interesting dynamic with the technology organization. 70% or 20 of those individuals that work within the Office of Technology were graduates of the university. How many of you think that's a good thing? Okay. How many of you think that's a bad thing? How many of you think that it really doesn't matter? Well, for me, in my particular environment, it was good and bad. I know that's kind of, playing both sides of the fence. It was good that I knew that we had a staff that understood the nature and the culture of the university. And they had basically had grown up in that culture, moving from first-year freshman students, and in some cases, gone on to get their graduate degrees in some of our graduate programs. So they had a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the culture of the university. What I saw bad in this is that how do you get new ideas into the institution? When you have, especially when it comes to technology, when you have 70% of the individuals that work on the staff grew up there and all they know is what they grew up in. And it's almost like, being poor, growing up poor. And then you grew up in a poor neighborhood, you don't know you're poor until you move out and you see, people who have more means than you, and then you realize, like, hey, I must have been really poor. It's kind of the same type of phenomenon that we had with our technology staff. There was a huge deficiency in providing professional development for the staff members. And so what they knew is what they knew. This is the way that we grew up in this organization, and these are the things that we learned. Probably one of the most interesting ways that it was described to me was I had another official at the university said, well, Leroy, we got a lot of inbreeding within our IT organization. And I was like, well, okay, that's kind of a weird way of putting it, but I can see where you're coming from. So again, all of this was trying to get at what is understanding the nature and the culture of the organization. Now, I showed you some comments from some of the consultant reports that were put out by these different groups that were brought in by the university. And I took those comments in my first meeting with the entire staff. We were in a room about this size, and I shared them with them. And I noticed I got a lot of weird looks in the audience from the staff members. And I asked the question, well, it kind of dawned on me. I said, well, how many of you have seen these before I showed them to you? And no one had seen them on the technology staff. In fact, I had several of them say that no one ever talked to us during this evaluation process. What's wrong with that picture? So rather than trying to go back and understand why they didn't talk to them, we had a frank conversation where we started to take a look at, okay, what was the perception internally of how we were doing as an organization? And we went through a series of processes that boiled down to these two areas. We summarized it into positive and negatives. The great thing that the folks in the Office of Technology loved doing was they liked helping people, being able to provide the technology equipment and resources that the university community needed. They loved working with their coworkers. Again, a lot of them actually went through the university together as students, and so they had a real good collegial relationship with their counterparts. And they loved the benefits of working in education. I've always told folks that one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done in my life is work in education. Because at the end of the day, in fact, one of my favorite things to do is to go to commencement, when you can see that students have achieved their goals and you know that you've had a small part in helping with that. Things that they didn't like, lack of collaboration. I heard the word silo probably 200 times in my first month in working at Lewis. Well, the IT department is a silo. Nobody knows what those guys do. They just spend a lot of money and nobody understands why they're spending all this money. And we don't see any direct benefit from it. There was a lack of training. I mentioned earlier that none of them had any really strong professional development. A couple of the leaders had gone to things like EDUCAUSE or other technology conferences, but at the end of the day, there was really no substantive professional development. And they were always under a microscope. In their opinion, the university leadership was always, assessing what they were doing, using that term assessment lightly. And not only the leadership, but faculty, staff, deans, everyone had scrutiny when it came to how they were doing their job. And in a lot of cases, they felt like the individuals that were the source of all of this scrutiny, they really didn't understand their job. So again, all in the process of trying to understand what was going on overall. Now, the dilemma that I had, first of all, was helping the organization after looking at all of this data that had been collected and talking to a number of folks. We had a problem, and the problem that we had was that there was really a misunderstanding in the role of technology within Lewis University. And from the data that I gathered, I found that pretty much the source of all of this misunderstanding was that a lot of the folks within the organization, depending upon where you fell, had a different perspective on what was the role of technology. And the next few slides will summarize that. I call it the great dichotomy, where on one end you have academic professionals, they're focused and moving with technology in one aspect, and you have technology professionals pushing in another direction. Well, what happens when you have individuals pushing on a pole at opposite ends and they're pushing in the opposite directions? You're just going to go in a circle. And that's what you had at Lewis, because there was a disjoint between the understanding of the faculty and staff and the role of technology and what the technology staff felt was their role within the organization. At Lewis, the academic professionals, and this is all from a technology standpoint, they looked at the technology as innovation, a way for them to help facilitate student achievement, scholarship, and some other things from an academic perspective. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, most institutions are steeped in tradition. This is strictly from a technology standpoint. When it came to the technology staff, their perspective, of course, was a little different. They were all about efficiency. How can we help provide access, services, and professional development and the technical support that we needed in order for the various departments and students to be more effective and efficient in how they go about their daily lives. We really don't get into a lot of, well, how is this going to be innovative or how it's going to promote the prestige of the institution. We just want to get you the tools that you need, when you need them, how you need them, and be able to support them when you have them there. This is the perception that we had coming into this environment. So, after looking at all of this and going through my own little research process with the staff and working with the administration, we had the synopsis that we needed. It was time for change. And when we look at change, a lot of people understand that, okay, change is just, not being where we are right now. Something is going to be different as we move forward. And it was clear to me that the university leadership did not want to stay where we were when it came to our technology resources and how technology was perceived on campus. And change is very difficult within organizations. And one of the things that was a big concern to me was how we were going to shepherd this change and not have, well, first of all, get the needed buy-in from all the various constituent groups on campus, and at the same time get the buy-in internally with the IT organization. Now, the changes that we were looking at implementing, we boiled down to these three areas. We wanted to have one cohesive technology unit within the organization that promoted the mission of Lewis University. We wanted to make sure that the resources that we provided were, focused and universal in nature. And we also want to become a more active part of the university community. Again, the word silo was thrown around numerous times in my first few months at the university. And it was almost like, technology was just this weird entity that was in the lower level of one of the academic buildings. And the only time you went down there was when you had no other choice but to go visit because you had an issue that there was no other way to resolve. In fact, there were several departments that, admitted to me later on that they literally found workarounds to some of the issues that they faced rather than engage the technology organization for help, because the relationship was just that caustic between the two. Now, the good news about change. Change is successful when people need it, first of all. They expect it and they accept it. Well, how do you know that people need, expect, and accept change? You need to have some way of going about that process of understanding that the individuals involved in a change process are on board with it and understand what's going on. And the solution for me was change management. Again, going back to my background in project management, change management is a really big tenet of project management methodology. And so I had already had sort of the quote-unquote training and how to go through this process, but I needed to adapt it to my current environment at Lewis University. Now, what is change management? I know I use that term quite a bit. This is the definition of change management. If you go to the PMI website, pmi.org, when you look up change management, this is the definition that you will get. I highlighted several words in this definition. Change is not a one-time thing, in my opinion. In fact, change is constant. It has to be comprehensive in order to be successful. Now, with the term comprehensive, it doesn't mean that every change that you implement within your organization has to affect everyone within the organization. But in the case of technology, usually that is the case. But for those people that the change is brought into the organization to help or to help facilitate moving forward, it does need to have some benefit, if possible, for all those individuals that are part of that. And you need to have some structure. Any of you have been in a situation where you had someone in leadership say, hey, we're going to, I don't know, I used to work in K-12, we're going to give every student an iPad. And nobody ever talked to you as a practitioner in the classroom or as an IT support individual or an administrator that would be affected by this. It was just, hey, we're going to do this. Not a good way to bring about change. Now, I'm not saying that it can't work, but you need to make sure that it's comprehensive, cyclical, and structured in its implementation in your organization. So why is it important? I have some stats to share with you on change and change management that you may find a little shocking, and these actually came from Global Knowledge, probably one of the largest IT training organizations in the world at this point. Approximately 70% of all change initiatives fail. Why do you think that's the case? Well, usually the reason why change fails is that individuals or organizations fail to have the right individuals involved in the change process. And it's, in particular in higher ed, the big words or the big phrase that you hear in higher ed especially is, shared governance. Presidents, in fact, the keynote speaker from yesterday actually talked about shared governance. It's one of those great things that university presidents and provosts and high-level officials love to talk about. But as someone who is a little bit lower down the totem pole when it comes to the influence at the university, the farther and farther you get from the leadership, the less and less shared governance and shared decision making actually takes place. That's just the reality of my experience. Yours could be totally different. Along with that, only about 2.5% of the workforce actually have involvement in the change or as far as bringing about the implementation of the change and taking the lead in the change implementation. So roughly, if you have faculty and staff of 300 individuals and you have a change that's universal to the organization, based on the research, you're probably going to have less than 10 people that are going to be involved in the change process. I agree with that based on some of my experiences. 34% of the workforce, when they decide, look, when the change comes about, I don't know about it. It's already taken place. And so a lot of individuals who are part of the change process feel left out. And it's one of the things that's a detriment to change management. And 16% of your workforce change once you go through the process of a particular change. Any of you have ever gone through any what I call enterprise level changes within your organization? Things like ERP implementation or a new phone system, those things that are universal to the organization. Were there any casualties of those processes? Without knowing your organization, I would willing to wager that you probably had quite a bit of individuals who either decided that, hey, this is not for me, I'm going to move on to something else, or they just weren't able to move with the university or the organization as the change was brought into place. Now, another thing that's important to remember, I talk a lot about change management, and in change management, one size does not fit all. In fact, there are a number of different change management models that are out there. For the sake of time, I won't go through all of these, but if you just go to Google and just Google change management models, you will come up with a number of different models that are out there, all of which have been researched and proven to work in certain environments. But one of the things that you need to do when it comes to change management is that you have to understand how to find the right model. And there are some things that you can do to help you find the right model for your organization. First, you have to understand the environment. One of the things that I did early on at Lewis was that I literally spent probably 50% or more of my time in the first 6 months I was there just talking to people. And it's not just the IT staff. Now, the IT staff was involved, but not just the IT staff. I went and I spoke with the Technology Approval Council. I went and I spoke to the Dean's Council. I went and I spoke to any number of groups, the University Academic Affairs Council. I even went and spoke to student groups, actually 3 times to student groups, about what we were doing in the Office of Technology to make sure that we were taking into consideration their needs as we move forward. So you have to understand your environment. You also have to understand the support level that you have from leadership. Now, of course, there's sometimes there's a discrepancy between what the public party line is when it comes to various changes and what the reality is after the fact. We've all experienced that. Now, if you're lucky, they're consistent, but there could be some variances in what the public perception is or the public party line is and what the actual reality is that you're dealing with. You need to understand what the support level is from your leadership. The communication structure. If there's one thing that you need to understand about change management or change in general is that probably the thing that helps in the success or the lack thereof more than anything else is your communication. And the communication internally with your staff, if you're a member of the IT organization and the community as a whole, communication is very important in change management. The resources that you have available to implement. And making sure that you have not only the resources to implement, but to sustain those changes once they're put into place. Now, there are always some threats to changes. And for those of you who are project management people, you probably would term these risk. And risk management is another whole separate topic. There's resistance to change, and there's resistance to change at every level of the organization when you go into it. I will talk here in a second about a couple of major enterprise projects that we're starting to work on, and I can tell you that we have resistance to those changes at each of these levels, including with the change agents, the people who are going to be responsible for the change. Why are we doing this? Do we really need to do this now? You hear all of the different reasons why you don't want to change. In reality, in my experience, when I talk to people about, well, why you're resistant to the change, it's not so much about what's in the best interest of the organization. It's more about what's in my best interest. And what you have to do as a leader within your organization is to help try to bridge that gap and to try to make people feel comfortable with what's in my best interest and see how you can marry that with what's in the best interest of the university and come to some type of compromise on that. Because if you don't, you're going to have issues as you move through. A lack of support. Any of you have ever been in part of a change within your organization, especially like an enterprise IT project, where you have all of the rah-rah at the beginning? We had a unanimous decision on that ERP solution, and you get about a year in, and it's just those IT people. They were the ones that did this. Yes, I've been there. Make sure that the support is there, make sure that it's ongoing, and make sure you have that commitment from the leadership as you move forward. Lack of resources. We're going to give every student an iPad, but we don't have a wireless network that can accommodate it. It's a great idea to give everyone an iPad and give them resources. All the textbooks are going to be on the iPad, but if you don't have a wireless network that can accommodate it, make sure that you have the comprehensive total cost of ownership for these things. And of course, politics. One of the least favorite parts of my job, but seems like as I advance in my career, it becomes more and more one of those things that you have to address. And you have to address the politics. You have to play, barter town sometimes. Okay, I'll give a little on this if I can get these things, and you have to understand and play the politics. It's just one of the things you have to deal with. Now, for us, I mentioned earlier that there are a number of different change management models that are out there. For us at Lewis, we have adopted, we like simple, and you'll see this as we move a little bit, how simplistic some of our ideas are. This is what works for us. As far as our change management. Now, yours may be totally different based on your research and understanding the needs of your organization, but for us, we focus on the planning, implementation, evaluation, and renewal and sustainability of the resources. Now, in application of what you just saw as far as our change management process, we went through a number of steps to change the IT organization to address that transformational, innovative technology goal that the university leadership had. And we started by creating a new vision, and we started simple. At Lewis, when I first arrived, these were the two IT organizations that we had on campus. They were two separate entities. And to me, a name should mean something. I look at these two, and I said, well, Instructional Technology Services Organization. And for some reason, the organization was big into acronyms. They called it ITSO. And ITSO and CATS. I heard ITSO and CATS, ITSO and CATS. And so finally one day I had the nerve to ask someone, what does ITSO stand for? And this is what I got. And I said, well, where did that come from? And they said, well, it sounded nice when we said it. And I was like, well, okay, then why do we have CATS? I mean, instructional and academic technology, isn't instructional technology a component of academic technology? And so it had to make sense to me, and it didn't make sense to me. So after going around and around with the staff and the leadership, we said, well, look, we're going to change the name. Because right now, these two organizations, there's a negative perception, whether it's fair or unfair, within the university environment on these two organizations. We're going to change the name. In fact, we're actually going to create a new logo, and we're going to keep it simple. We just call it the Office of Technology. Short, sweet, you know what we do. Now, a part of that is that we reorganized the Office of Technology. And you can see Brother James Gaffney, our president, of course, he is the leader of all that we do at Lewis University. The Lewis University is a sponsored ministry of the Christian Brothers of De La Salle. And Brother James Gaffney is a member of that organization. My direct supervisor is Robert DeRose. He's a finance guy. And for those of you who are in IT management, working for finance folks and working for academics, totally different worlds. And I've worked for both. With finance folks, if you can show them the return on investment, the bottom line, that is their focus, the fiduciary responsibility to the university. Academics, what's going to increase student achievement, what's going to increase research and scholarship, that is their focus. And I hate to say it, in a lot of cases, those two areas are usually in some type of conflict. I should say conflict, but there's a disjoint between what their goals are and the end game and how it affects the university. But that's just to give you a sense of where our perspective is. And then from there, we have 4 departments within the Office of Technology. Now, you've noticed that there's something that's probably glaringly missing on in those 4 departments. You're probably wondering, where's the academic folks? Where's the academic technology? Well, we made a conscious effort at Lewis University not to have quote-unquote academic technology office per se. What we have at Lewis is that we have an area that's focused on instructional design and online and blended learning. Now, those other aspects that would normally in some organizations be classified as academic technology, like classroom technologies and labs and those type of things, those are handled by our Technology Support Center. And as far as the software licensing for all of our enterprise level software, things like our Microsoft licensing agreement, SPSS, those are handled by our administrative systems. And within the Lewis structure, we believe that those are all support entities. And what we wanted what you would term the academic presence, academic technology presence, we wanted them to be focused strictly on student learning, academic research and scholarship, and we took all the technical aspects and blended it into the Office of Technology. And those instructional design and scholarship aspects of our academic technology, those actually report to the provost through a position in the provost's office. So the academics are happy that they're able to focus all their time and efforts on what they're there for, and we leave all the support and dealing with the equipment and resources and support of those things to the other side of the house. So that's why it's not listed on this particular screen. We came up with a new mission statement. And, mission statements, they're supposed to be comprehensive. And we went through a 2-month process refining this. In fact, we brought in a consultant to help us with this process to come up with a unified mission that not only that we as the Office of Technology could rally around and use that as a guiding force, but something that the university community, when they read it, they understand who we are, why we're there, and our importance into the organization that is Lewis University. Again, this is a work in progress. This is our mission statement at this point, but we're looking at ways to try to have a more focused mission statement as we move forward and as we have more focus on our technology operations. 3 areas of focus that we want to focus on. Capacity, making sure that we have the capacity within all of our technology resources, whether it's in the classroom or in our networks or in our server infrastructure, to make sure that everyone within the university that needs to have a particular type of technology or some type of secondary technologies in order to use the tools that they need to use in their particular environments, that the capacity is there to meet that. And once we built that capacity, we wanted to give access to the various constituent groups to that technology. One of the most controversial things that I think I did in my first year at Lewis was that when I first got there was an extremely strict filtering policy on students, where students literally had to log in probably on average about 10 times a day, depending upon where they are on the network and what they were trying to do to resources. And it was extremely frustrating to students. And so we made a conscious decision, and I like to ask the question why. And so I engaged the university community and especially the IT organization, and I asked, well, why do we do this? And it's like, well, we don't want them doing certain things. And it's like, well, how they're supposed to reap the benefits of the technology if you have so many limitations on it, and what is the issue when it comes to, well, it's a security issue. And so, well, we control the network, we control the network at the switching level. Why can't we deal with the security issues at that level and then allow the students to come in and use the technology in ways that they feel like are going to be beneficial to them? And so after going around and around, they said, well, okay, got the administration to agree to it, but I think one of them told me that if this goes bad, it's going to go bad. Well, it had the opposite effect. Students loved it. In fact, we had several students that went to our president and said, this is great, this is the best it's been since we've been here. And we didn't compromise on our security because we handled it at a different level within our organization. And finally, once you had the capacity and access, we wanted to make sure we had appropriate support. More and more in higher ed, technology support is becoming a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week endeavor, especially when you look at things like online learning and alternative means of gaining your education, whether it's through online learning or if it's non-traditional semesters. We want to make sure that we have the support available to meet those needs. Certain characteristics that we wanted to display within the Office of Technology. First, we wanted to be collaborative. I mentioned that I've spent quite a bit of my time talking to other constituent groups within the university. And all those individuals that were on the organizational chart that are part of the IT management team, we do the same thing. We go out, we ask, can we come in and talk to various groups? And the university now is starting to invite us to more and more things because they are excited about some of the things that they hear and they want to know more about it. And it helps us in moving forward with the IT initiatives that we have on campus. We want to be a dynamic organization. Now, I'm not talking about dynamic and, hey, we're the best in the world and we're great. And no, what I mean by dynamic is that as the needs of the university changes, so shall the Office of Technology. Sometimes, as an IT professional, once we have things set up, we don't like to change them. We don't like to move things. We want to make sure that once we have our security set up, our access set up, and everything's great, and that's how we like to leave it until it's time for an upgrade. We want to be more agile and dynamic in our approach to and how we do our job. We also want to be proactive. One of the things that I hate when I go into an IT organization is that nothing is done until something breaks. And it just really drives me up the wall that, people, well, what do you do? Well, when this particular product breaks, we go fix it. Or if the network's down, we go fix it. What are we trying to do within the Office of Technology at Lewis University? We're trying to look at ways to proactively to enhance and to continuously improve the technology resources, access, and support that we have on our campus. And we want to be transparent. We're no longer those guys in the lower level of the Learning Resource Center that spend a lot of money and no one knows what is going on. For the first time this year, we actually published our budget, and we shared our budget with the university community on where we were spending our resources. And of course, some folks told me that I was a little crazy for doing that, but we want to make sure that people know what we're doing, what are the ramifications for these changes and the benefits for these changes that we're making, and what is the cost, whether it's human resources or financial resources to the university to bring about these changes. Because a big part of our evaluation process is that we need to make sure, of course, working for a finance guy, that we have a good return on the investments that we make in technology. Now, communication, we've stepped up communication quite a bit because communication was a big issue and it's very important to change management. We created a new website and portal. If you go to our website, you can see updates, of what's going on within the Office of Technology, things about software upgrades, particular issues that are out there that are hot topics within technology. We also have a new tech alert system where through email and if need be through text messaging, we can give the university community, information about issues that are going on not only on campus but some things that may come down the pipe, such as, if there's a new phishing email out there that is asking people for their bank account information, which to this day I still can't believe that people still send their information into those places. But we try to be proactive in our approach to making sure that people understand what's going on and keeping them informed. We actively participate in committees, not only technology-related committees, but committees that are related to academics, operations, administrative resources. We want to make sure that we have participation outside of technology within the organization. We also want to appeal to what people want and need. We can put in the greatest technology resources in the world, but if it's not something that you can see a benefit in using, then it will just sit idle and no one will use it, and then it will be just a waste of resources. And we, of course, at any step in this process, to keep the leadership involved. Nothing gets you into trouble more than you go out and you make a change within the organization that has far-reaching ramifications in the leadership. They could know about it, but if they don't truly understand it, then it could cause issues as you move forward. Now, to wrap up, I just want to talk quickly about two major projects that we have going on at Lewis University and how change management has helped us in these two projects. When I got to Lewis University, my first sit down with leadership, they said, well, you have two major issues that you have to deal with. And these were the two major issues. Right now, we have a homegrown ERP, student information system, that has been on campus now for 40 plus years. And as the university has grown and evolved, it's just not sufficient to meet the needs anymore. So we're in the process of trying to replace that system. And also with the phone system, the phone system is older than I am, and I'm no 20-year-old anymore. And we're having to go through the process of updating our communication systems to make sure that they meet the needs of the university. As far as our ERP selection timeline, these are the steps that we went through in this process. Again, if you're familiar with project management methodology, a lot of it is, you can see how it could fit into that framework. Our Director of Administrative Systems, he's also a PMP, so he, of course, likes to use the methodology as well. Two things I want to highlight here. The ERP committee and develop a selection criteria. In this process, those were the two things that I think were the most important in this process. The reason being is that the ERP selection committee is not just technology professionals. We have a cross-section of about 30 individuals from the various areas on campus that have a vested interest in this change, which is what we're getting ready to bring into to fruition on our campus, a major change. And we wanted them to not only understand why this change was needed, but we want them to be a part of the process in selecting the new product that we would bring in for our ERP. And also, once they're informed and they understand why the change is needed, they have gone back to their various groups and they have delivered, communications about the importance of it. And so we have great lines of communication throughout this process. And the selection criteria, you notice that we didn't develop a selection criteria until after we developed the RFP and distributed the RFP. The selection criteria, we needed to have the university ERP committee develop that. It wasn't an IT selection criteria, although I have a sneaky suspicion as we move down this road it's going to be an IT decision and issue, especially if things don't go so well. But we wanted to make sure that as part of this change process that the university community was involved and informed in that process. And just going real quickly through these were some of the criteria that the committee set forth. Of course, they wanted to make sure that it had the requirements that we were looking for. Cost is always an issue. The compatibility with the university technology, we didn't want to look at bringing in an entirely new infrastructure, have a huge infrastructure cost associated with this. And we also wanted to partner with an organization that had, experience in this area. We weren't looking for, I guess, a drop and run type of implementation. We wanted to look for a long-term partnership because this is going to be a long-term, far-reaching project for the university. And the implementation methodology. How do you go about implementing the technology? Do you do what I call a big bang? You come put it in and turn it on and see what happens, or is it a staged approach to the process? At this point, we're down to our two finalists, and we feel good about where we are. In fact, on Monday, I have a presentation to the Board of Trustees with the recommendation of what product that the ERP committee unanimously recommends that we move forward with. And if all goes well with that meeting, then we will move forward with that project. The phone system, we have I think it's a 42-year-old phone system on our campus, and it hasn't had any significant upgrades in quite some time. In fact, the phone system that we have now, the company that produced it, they stopped producing that product 20 years ago. So we've got a problem, and I keep my fingers crossed that this thing doesn't die. If it does, we're going to have to go to eBay or somewhere to try to find parts for it. We've gone through a similar process that we had with the ERP solution, where we have selected the Avaya platform. And no, I do not get a kickback from Avaya, but since we've made the decision, I just wanted you to know what we're using, what we're planning to use. With the Avaya, our platform is much more than just a phone system. And I think, to use the terms that my CFO used, we're going from the Model T age to the Jet age in one fell swoop, where, of course, you have all the communications via voice over IP technologies that you would have in a traditional VoIP system, but you can also do things like have, telepresence, unified communications, mobility resources. All of this is built into the solution. And finally, the last thing I want to talk about is that with this suite, one of the great things about it is that it gives you different levels. So if I'm an individual, the only thing I want is a dial tone. I can just give you a dial tone. But if I'm an individual that I want to have video calls with the site coordinator in Albuquerque, it will give us the option to do that as well. Or if I want to have use my tablet as a phone, and when I'm at a conference, when my office phone rings, it will ring on my tablet and I can answer it, and the person on the other end thinks I'm sitting in my office. You can do that as well. It gives you flexibility, you can mix and match, and you can have the opportunity to have your own personalized experience. Now, the initial results, like I said, this is the first year that we've gone through this process. We have, of course, we're looking at bringing in more and better technologies to the organization. We've gotten positive feedback, in particular with the collaboration and the community involvement. People like it when they see us. Sometimes I don't like it when I go to the dining hall and you have 20 questions from people about technology when you're just trying to eat a sandwich, but you know, it's a necessary evil that comes along with the job. If there's one thing that I guess you could say is a negative, I don't look at it as a negative, but I think it looks at it as an investment. It is time consuming. To have collaborative change management within your organization takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. But I think it's time and effort that's well invested. Finally, my last slide. Heraclitus, the only thing that's constant is change. When you are working in higher ed, change is going to be constant. And if you work in technology in higher ed, you're really going to be a part of change. How that change is implemented and who's involved in that change and how that is communicated and how it's accepted will determine whether or not you're going to be successful and how you go through your daily lives as IT professionals and educators. But again, I believe that if you have a structured process by which to do this, that you will be successful and your constituent groups will be happy on your campus. Okay, I'm done. If you have any questions, I apologize I didn't bring any cards with me, but I have my contact information here on the screen. Please feel free to reach out, and thank you for your time. And do you have any questions?